So our next speaker is Ondrej Koumal with PMI. So the format of Ondrej's presentation will be a little bit different than what you've seen so far today. Because of some updates to the state of the science, Ondrej will be presenting PowerPoint slides versus a video. But with that, a little bit about Ondrej. He's the Director of External Affairs at Philip Morris International, based in Lausanne, Switzerland. Over the past 20 years, he's held numerous roles, primarily in PMI's external affairs function in the Czech Republic, Switzerland, and the United Arab Emirates, and the US. He has been involved in the science around smoke-free products since 2012, when he supported the joint venture between PMI and Swedish Match, which was in place between 2009 and 2015. Today, he works at the intersection of science, policy, and communications, focusing on the evidence around the role that smoke-free products can play in addressing individual and population-level harms associated with smoking. Thank you, Ondrej.
Hello, hello. Excellent. So thank you, Summer. I apologize. I didn't realize that the bio I sent to her was so long. And now I know you all came here to watch movies. But instead we will have a little bit of theater, which is a less popular discipline. I hope it will not be a turn-off and people will still stay. So I did a video last year, and when Jess asked me to come here this year, if I would like to present this, I said yes, but maybe we won't play the video. I have the slides, there's some newer data, so why don't we go through the updated presentation. And I cannot control the slides, but I will give an excellent. And I will be able to control the slides now. Thank you. Right. So most of you will probably know that we launched our heated tobacco product, IQOS, in Japan, in Nagoya back in November 2014. And we've seen some publications, independent publications, two of them are shown on the screen, that basically using sales data demonstrated that the reason why cigarette sales or combustible tobacco product sales were declining in Japan, there is no other explanation than actually the uptake of heated tobacco products. If we look at the most recent data, and I apologize, I didn't realize that on the big screen the bottom line will be poorly visible, but at the top in the dark you see combined sales of cigarettes and cigarillos, which are the dominant combustible tobacco product category. And at the bottom, these are consumables for heated tobacco products, not just for PMI's heated tobacco products. So this is total industry volumes going into 2023. As you can see, the two lines are strongly correlated, but it still does not mean that fewer people are smoking in Japan, right? Because sales data are useful. It's typically very rapid. It's easy to obtain. You don't have to run a survey, but it doesn't have to tell the whole story, right? So, for example, you can have people, maybe, I don't know, smokers just started smoking fewer cigarettes and started using IQOS, right? Maybe not necessarily in Japan, but in other countries with sales data, we see a lot of confounding with illicit trade. If you are in Europe, and I think maybe some of the people here are from the Nordics, we see that a lot of people do cross-border shopping or illicit trade. Actually, the COVID pandemic was a fantastic example, because when you look at a country like Norway, during COVID times, sales of cigarettes or snus jumped more than 30%. Why? It's not that people suddenly started using more cigarettes. It's because they've always been only around 50 or 60% of the Norwegian tobacco consumption is actually purchased in Norway. So you have these patterns that will influence the sales data. So we need to look a little bit deeper, and we looked at two surveys. One is the Ministry of Health funded National Health and Nutrition Survey, so that's a government survey. And we've also been running our own surveys in Japan since 2016, both cross-sectional surveys in the general adult population, and we also survey users from our IQOS database. So this is the government survey. I know it looks a little bit scary, but I'll take you through it. So like any government survey in any country where you guys come from, sometimes less frequently, sometimes more frequently, the government asks a question about the prevalence of smoking. Have you had a cigarette in the past 30 days, or have you ever smoked, etc., etc. And that's exactly what the Japanese government has been doing forever. Now I'm showing just the past 10 years. And but we know, so the prevalence, adult prevalence was around 20%. But we know that here, 2015, 16, 17, you already saw on the previous slides with the sales data that heated tobacco products were growing, right? They were capturing market share in Japan. But the survey still kept asking the same question. Essentially, are you smoking cigarettes or not? So it's a little bit unclear when people responded to these questions whether they truly included heated tobacco product consumption there or not. In 2018, they changed the survey and started asking the questions about heated tobacco products and cigarettes separately. So if we look at the 2019 data here at the very right, we know that 12% of the Japanese adult population was only smoking cigarettes, 1.1% was smoking cigarettes and using heated tobacco products, 3.4% were only using heated tobacco products, and the thick black bar, 0.2%, is other or undefined products. So what we see is essentially that the smoking prevalence have dropped from around 20% prior to the introduction of heated tobacco products to around 13% after the introduction. We can also calculate very easily what is the so-called dual use, so the proportion of people who are using heated tobacco products without smoking. And if you do that, you will find out that it's more than 75% of heated tobacco product users in Japan do not smoke. Unfortunately, we don't have more recent government data. So they stopped the survey during the pandemic, 2020, 2021. They ran the survey in 2022, but they still have not released the data. Last time I checked was about 2 weeks ago. So I think the data is still not out. I think they made some methodological changes. Maybe they're trying to reconcile with the previous years. So let's look at our own data, which is a little bit more recent. You can actually, the video link that is in the presentation, you can go and see the design of our survey. So again, it's 2 surveys. One is in the general adult population. It's a face-to-face survey. And the other one is an online survey based on the IQOS user database, okay? So when we look at the general population survey, we see very similar trends as with the government survey, and we separate. So the very top line is all tobacco prevalence. The dark line is cigarette smoking, and the bottom line is heated tobacco product use, not just IQOS. Again, we are looking at the categories. So you see that the trends are very similar. We see accelerated decline in cigarette smoking prevalence and a moderate decline in overall tobacco prevalence. When we look at the survey of IQOS users, we can see where do they come from. And what we see is that 97% of them, so 91 plus 6, have some kind of a history of tobacco use. 3% reported that they initiated tobacco use with IQOS. We also asked similar questions in the general population survey. And in the general population survey, where of course the sample size of IQOS users is much, much smaller, I think it was 99.7% of IQOS users in the general population sample claimed that they had a tobacco history. If we look at the patterns of use over time in the IQOS survey, we see that the proportion of IQOS users who are not smoking combustible tobacco products is increasing to around 83%. So remember, 75% in the general population survey of the Ministry of Health. This is data from IQOS users, but you have to remember that these are people who purchased IQOS, agreed to be registered in our database, and responded to the questionnaire. So It's not exactly the same. Again, the design of the survey is different, but I'll show you the same figures from the general population survey. So you see that in the general population survey, much smaller sample size of IQOS users, so much higher confidence intervals. But again, the trend is the same. And regardless of the survey, majority of heated tobacco product users are actually not smoking in Japan, and a majority of them, close to 100%, actually smoked before. So I think that's good news. Finally, we look at the survey of adolescents. The most recent one was ran between May and August 2021. And we compare the results with a similar survey that was run between 2017 and 2018. So always actually the bars on the left for different types of tobacco products, cigarettes, ever use, past month use. I'm repeating it because I'm not sure whether you guys can read it. Daily use, so here you have cigarettes, e-cigarettes, heated tobacco products, middle school, and on the right-hand side you have high school. So the first bar is the first survey and the second bar is the second survey. So what you can see clearly is that the uptake of heated tobacco products among adolescents in Japan is very low, and it is in fact decreasing. So in conclusion, I believe that the prevalence data in Japan show that the overall tobacco use is moderately declining, but the share of tobacco users who smoke is declining much faster at the same time as the prevalence of heated tobacco products increased. So I think it does indicate that heated tobacco products in Japan are successfully displacing cigarettes. The cigarette smoking was around a plateau of 19 to 20% prior to the introduction of heated tobacco products. And today it's probably somewhere around 12 or 13%, or today probably even less. We also know that virtually all heated tobacco product users have some history of smoking, and we also know that overwhelming majority of them do not smoke today. And finally, the results from the adolescent survey of middle and high school students in Japan shows that the prevalence of heated tobacco product use among this group is very rare. And that's all I had.
Great, thank you so much.
Any questions from the audience? Great. Well, thank you for such a... Oh, we've got a question down here.
Oh, thanks. Do you have any qualitative data from the people who took the survey to find out why they were so encouraged to substitute?
Yep. So we do have some data we actually published, and it's a rare accomplishment because for a tobacco company to publish anything, it takes time due to the rejections from most journals. We actually do have a study that compares the reasons for use, and we specifically looked at the reasons related to the potential health benefits. And we know that, and this was a study that compared not just Japan, but we also had a number of other countries. And we know that IQOS users who believe essentially that the product is less harmful are far more likely to not only switch, but also to stay switched and to have lower cigarette consumption if they are dual users.
Did you remember what was the response ratio in the study based on the IQOS database?
I do not. But it was. I can tell you from experience that the response rates to online surveys, I don't want to say something wrong, but I think generally it's low single digits in terms of percentage of people who respond to these surveys.
And all units in the database was asked to participate to your survey?
No, okay. It would be a selection based on our how many people we expect to respond, so that we get to the sample size. We are aiming in these IQOS user surveys. We are aiming for around 2,000 people who respond.
Thanks.
So we would power that. We would reach out to the to as many people as we believe will yield us 2,000 responses.
Yes, thanks.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Ondrej.